Jan Johnson did make it today. She's been coming every Sunday and sitting right there.
Oh,
Got the biggest smile all the time. So we'll just look at Eva's smile all the time through today's lesson. The land of Israel, part 5. Now we had several weeks ago, one Sunday we had part 1 and 2. And then when we got to the third Sunday, we did 3 and 4. 3 was kind of short, so we did 4. So this is 5. This will be the last one. So here's the situation. Israel feels that the land that they conquered during the 6-day war belongs to Israel. Y'all remember we covered the 6-day war? Before the 6-day war, Israel did not possess the Golan Heights, the West Bank, the eastern half of Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, nor the Sinai Peninsula. Today's terminology for this is the pre-1967 borders and the post-1967 borders. You will see this phrase in the newspaper and sometimes hear it in the news, and you know what they're talking about, the pre and the post. So to put that picture in your head, here it is. 1967 borders before, that's the pre, before the 6-day war. Oh, that in green was not Israel. That land was given back to them in 1948 by the British. The parts in green, the British did not give back to them. Now, after the war is over, the 6-day war, look at it. All the green is gone because Israel conquered all of those. In 1982, then Israel did agree to give the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt. But that's the pre and the post they're talking about. There was another war, I don't know if you've heard about that, it was in 1973, it was called the Yom Kippur War. This was fought from October 6th to October the 25th. It was a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria against Israel in 1973. Now Iran, Iraq, and Russia contributed to the war. They entered in and they actually contributed it. The war mainly took place in the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights, occupied by Israel during the 1967 6-day war. So after that war in 1967, 1973, here they go again trying to get after Israel, trying to break through. Egypt set this war in place by moving its army across the Sinai Peninsula while the Syrian army began attacking Israel on the Golan Heights. This was a surprise attack by these two Arab nations, and it was no accident that they initiated this attack on Israel's most holy day. Yom Kippur is what it's called. It's also known by the rest of us as the Day of Atonement. That is only one time a year. You know, we talked about that several weeks ago, and that one time a year, that's where they all want to gather, as many could journey back to Jerusalem, and they had 2 goats, and the one was slaughtered and he was sacrificed, and the blood was put in a bowl, and the priest washed his hands in that blood, and he rubbed it on the one that was alive. And then they turned him on and said, that's like, here's our sacrifice for all the people in Israel one time, and we're going to rub it on there. And when that goat is led way out where he can't return again, then the people felt like they were cleansed of all their sins. It was a one-way cleansing. Now, what did they call that goat?
Scapegoat.
Huh? Scapegoat. So you hear that term, scapegoat. Put all of them here, and then you push your sins off. But these two nations decided that that was a good day to do it because they wouldn't be expecting anything. For 3 days, the Arab armies were successful, and they inflicted heavy damage on Israel. They lost a lot of planes, a lot of people. But after 3 days, Israel was better prepared, and then the battle turned in Israel's favor, and they began to push the Egyptian and Syrian armies backwards. The United States and Russia jumped into the war by resupplying the armies. The the U.S. to Israel, and the Russia to the Arabs. Once again, the Arab nations face disgrace as Israel not only took over the war, but marched further than they did in 1967 into Egypt. They went all the way nearly to Cairo, and then Damascus is in Syria up there, and they went all the way back close enough to start firing on Damascus. They didn't do that in the 67 war. So this time they pushed it a little further. They're trying to teach a lesson. The war started on October 6th and ended on the 25th, and once again, God was with his chosen people, Israel, and they were successful in the war. You may have heard of the 1978 Camp David Accords that followed. It led to this return of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. That was in 82, 4 years after this. And it normalized relations. The first peaceful recognition, I'm getting my throat stopped, of Israel by an Arab country. Egypt continued its drift away from the Soviet Union and eventually left the Soviet sphere of influence entirely. They probably remember from the 1967 war when Russia initiated it by reporting to Egypt that Israel was attacking Syria. And it was a lie. You may know who, we didn't talk about that, who that was in charge in Russia at that time? Khrushchev was out in 65. Brezhnev. I just want to say Brezhnev. We have to say it just right. You have to say it a certain way. Yeah, he was the Soviet leader that started that. So today, let's just look again at Israel's neighbors, and there's 4 of them that have boundaries touching them. But we also have here in the black circles 3 countries, even though they don't touch the borders of Israel, they're all Arab countries and they support these other 4. So in a sense, it's like the poor little Israel in the yellow has got to face, what, 4, 5, 6, 7 countries against them. Arabs hate the Jews. Did we talk about where the name Jew come from?
Judah.
Huh? Judah. When they were in captivity in Babylon, they kind of inherited this name, talking about them being Jews. And so when they came back, they felt like we're the Jews. They were the southern kingdom. Is that important? Well, yeah, because sometimes you'll hear in the news that the Jews say these other Israelites from the northern 10 tribes, they're not Jews. Well, they're all relatives, Abraham, Isaac. And so you see some fussing out there that the real Jews are the ones that went to Babylon and come back and pick up that nickname. I don't know. You'll see it on the news sometimes. They argue among themselves. The areas of conflict today, still in the Golan Heights, we have snipers. The West Bank, the settlements over there, and the Gaza Strip firing rockets into Israel. Let's look at this part again about the Golan Heights. We talked a little bit about this the other day. Israel took command of the Golan Heights in the 6-day war. Since then, there have been numerous attacks by the Syrians. In 1973, with the help from the United Nations Peacekeeping Force, the Syrians and Israelis agreed to a neutral strip of land between the two, known as the Demilitarized Zone, DMZ. Here's a closer look at that. What you see in purple now, the UN Peacekeeping Corps tries to keep the 2 countries separated. It's about 3.5 miles at its widest point and 600 feet at the narrowest point in there. In November of 2012, we're getting up into current times, 3 Syrian tanks in violation of the zone in nearly 40 years, and it concerns countries of the region. Even today, there's often sniper fire in the Golan Heights from the angry Palestinians targeting Israelis living in the Israel part of the Golan Heights. firing across over there. Now the West Bank, what you see in this color right there, those are Palestinian settlements. This is top news today, what thing going on there. Israel's trying to hold on and keep control of the West Bank by building more communities for Israeli families to occupy. Here's number 30. Yay!
Sorry.
Come on in.
Thank you.
Joe Beth, we had just said this morning that Glenda told me there'd be 30 in class today, and I said she missed it with 29. So you came in the door to be number 30.
Well,
Glad to have you. You'll see this in the news a lot today. Israel's trying to get Israelites to move into this West Bank, and that's where they're fighting. They have communities of each. But they're really outnumbered by the Palestinians here.
I was curious, so I just looked it up. The distance between the Gaza Strip and Jerusalem is 99 miles.
Yeah, but well, not only that, it's so much higher. It's over 3,000 feet high, and everything down there is between, I think, 1,000 or less. And yeah, it's a military haven up there to put your stuff and shoot down on the people. Yeah, it's an important spot. Israel doesn't want to live in there particularly, but they don't want the enemy up there because there's too much advantage for them. You're right. The population of the West Bank was 620,000 at the end of 2017. Israel has over 100 settlements in the West Bank with a population of around 210,000. So that's 410,000 versus 210,000. And that's what they're fighting, trying to build. They're just trying to build as fast as they can. Not only Israel, but so are the Palestinians. And you can see by that map, they cover a lot of that. That's today's news. That's what's going on every day. The Gaza Strip. This is interesting. There were 21 Jewish settlements in Gaza consisting of about 2,000 Jewish people. Not very many in there. Most and possibly all of these settlers, they were paid to settle in Gaza in hope of eventually taking over Gaza. They actually paid them if you will move over there. And I'm sure Israel is building these houses and communities for them. But there has not been much expansion in the West Bank. I mean, in Gaza Strip at all. Now, 2005, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, realizing that the Palestinians were populating so fast that Israel would never be the majority in Gaza, so they presented the Disengagement Act to his government leaders. After long discussions and many changes, the recommendations were approved on February 2005. On August 1st, 2005, the Israeli settlers were given 2 weeks to move out of Gaza, but they were given land in Israel to move to, plus $200,000, that's in US dollars, to leave Gaza and resettle the land. It was expected to take several weeks for all these to move out, but it was done in less than a week. Why not? $200,000 in free land? And you didn't want to be in Gaza in the first place? Wow. It could have been a one-day exodus. Immediately after the evacuation of the settlers in Gaza, the Israeli soldiers destroyed their homes that were there. They didn't want those living in Gaza, the Arabs, to have those houses. They tore them all down. You ever heard a story like that in current days? I remember when we lived in Arizona, the people had cabins in some of the mountains up there, but it was Indian territory. And when their contracts ran out, the Indians wouldn't renew them. So a lot of people had to move out. They burned their cabins before they left. That was in the 1980s. So anyway, they destroyed the homes that were there. So we had no presence there. Since the disengagement process was completed, no Jews have been present in the Gaza Strip. Even with no Jewish settlements in Gaza, the United Nations, along with several other countries, regard Gaza to be under Israeli rule. Even though there's no Israeli people living there. They're not putting soldiers in there. You know, Israel was under Roman rule in the time of Jesus, but they had soldiers so they would hold down any uprising. Well, we don't have any Israelite soldiers in that area anymore, and nobody living in the communities. We've taken a long look at the land of Israel from Abraham to this current date. Currently, things are quiet on the Golan Heights, the border along Lebanon, and the Sinai Peninsula. Much of the fighting lately has been with Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians in the West Bank. So that's where the two hot spots are right now. Hamas runs Gaza. Whoever is the leader of Hamas is the leader of Gaza. It's a terrorist group is what it is. And the West Bank, you saw what the fighting was over, trying to build communities to grab land and have the majority. The Arabic countries still hate Israel, and the Palestinians are still trying to get the land of Israel. That one statement tells you what's going on around Israel today. But one thing will never change. God's chosen people, Israel. That's how they won the 1967 war so quickly. That's how they won the 1973 war so quickly. What does the Bible say about Israel being God's chosen people? Let's look at some of the scriptures and see what they say. And these are provided to me by Bill Young. I asked him to get some scriptures for me showing God's relationship with Israel, God's chosen people. So back in Exodus, I forgot to put that in there. Let me turn it on. Nice background, huh? I'm going to read the regular part there, and you, as a group, we're going to read in bold print together, okay? So I will sanctify the tent of the meeting and the altar, and I will sanctify Aaron and his sons to serve as priests. Then I will dwell among the Israelites and be their God. Then in Leviticus, I will walk among you and be your God, and you will be my people. In Jeremiah, at that time declares the Lord, I will be the God of all the families of Israel, and they will be my people. In Jeremiah, this is what the Lord God Almighty said of Israel, when I bring them back from captivity, which is Babylon, the people in the land of Judah and its towns will once again use these words. The Lord bless you, your prosperous city, your sacred mountain. People will live together in Judah and all of its towns, farmers and those who move about with their flocks. Again in Jeremiah, I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord. They will be my people, and I will be their God. Ezekiel, then you will live in the land I gave your ancestors. You will be my people, and I will be your God. Still in Ezekiel, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It will be an everlasting covenant. I will establish them and increase their numbers, and peace will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Zechariah, this is what the Lord Almighty says, I will save my people from the countries of the east and the west. I will bring them back to Jerusalem. They will be my people, and I will be faithful and righteous to them as their God. And now in the New Testament, what agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? for we are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. Again, in the New Testament, in Hebrews, this is the covenant. Now, you can substitute the word promise if that helps. This is the promise I will establish with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my laws in their minds, and I will write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Revelation, we're getting to the end. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. Thank you, Bill, for getting those for me. Isn't that amazing? Do we get the message? Israel's God's chosen people, and he is their God. You can't misunderstand it. Okay, that's great for the Israelites, but I'm not an Israelite. Oh, man. What about me, Lord? I could share many verses of Scripture to answer this question, but for now we're just going to use one that I like. It's in 1 John. It says, if anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in them, and they in God. That sums it up well, doesn't it? If anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God. That completes our study in the land of Israel. Don't get up and start moving yet. It was definitely a lot of information, wasn't it? And there's no way you can remember all of it. Me neither. But there are many segments that we should remember. So let's just take a little review. God first promised the land of Canaan to who? Abraham. Abraham had two sons. Which one inherited the promise by God? Loud. Isaac. Why do the Arab countries hate the Jews? Well, that's kind of a long answer. We'll put it this way. The Arabs believe that Ishmael should have been the heir to the promised land and not Isaac. And that's where they're based it. They go from there.
How does that, it makes no logic to me when you know the Muslims
Okay,
worship.
They believe that they believe in Abraham, but they believe that his firstborn son, rightfully so, was Ishmael. But it was not by Sarah. It was by the handmaid Hagar.
Yes, and that's what I wanted to say. Hagar was an Egyptian.
Yeah. But Scripture plainly states in Genesis, I think it is, and it tells them, no, Abraham, you will have a son by your wife, Sarah. And what did she do when she heard that? She laughed, yeah. But they did have one together. And the Scripture plainly says, I will use Isaac to be the leader of my people. The bloodline will go through him, not to Ishmael. And it even says, I will take care of Ishmael. He'll be the leader of 12 countries. That originated the Arabs out of that, the Arabs out of that line. So they don't have much to stand on. The Bible plainly says, God said through Isaac, but I'll take care of Ishmael later. But that's where it started from. Now, they may not tell you that. They may say, well, it's something else more. But everything the Israelites do, it makes the Muslim people mad. Everything they do. That hate will never go away until maybe the time that the Antichrist comes. And hopefully we're not here. We'll be out of here. Who was allowed to see the promised land but not go into it? Moses, God, yeah, that was good. Okay, so who led the Israelites into the promised land? Joshua. Which tribe of Israel failed to destroy the enemy and then settled somewhere else? 3 letters. Dan. What is that plot of land called today? That Dan did not. Gaza. Yeah, it's the Gaza Strip. They didn't conquer the people and take the land, and they're paying for it every day. Who built the first temple in Israel? The temple. Who built the temple? Solomon, and he was the son of David. God wouldn't let David do it. You know, too much blood on your hands. But Solomon, David could gather up materials, and then Solomon built. So temple number 1, great temple built by Solomon. Israel was divided into 2 kingdoms under the rule of Rehoboam. They were the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. What did they call the northern kingdom? Israel. What did they call the southern kingdom? Judah. Good job. In 722 BC, who conquered the northern kingdom called Israel? Who conquered them?
Syrians?
Yeah, the Assyrians. And then in 586 BC, who conquered the southern kingdom of Judah? Babylon, yeah. Babylonians. When the Jews came back from their captivity in Babylon, they rebuilt a very crude temple. But then someone else made it into a magnificent temple. And who was he? It was, King Herod the Great. He's got a son called Herod too, in the time of Jesus. Who gave the order for all the babies to be killed in Bethlehem, 2 years and under? Same one, Herod the Great. Who destroyed Herod's temple in 70 AD? Romans. In 1948, which country gave the land back to Israel?
Britain.
Great Britain. Five distinct pieces of real estate were not given back to Israel in 1948. When they give the 5 pieces that we recognize, I'll put them up for you. The Sinai Peninsula, they didn't give it back, or the Gaza Strip, or the Golan Heights, nor East Jerusalem, and the West Bank. So in 1948, they gave them land, but they didn't give these. What are 4 countries that border Israel? Who will raise their hand and say, I can name all 4? Who can name 1? Willie? Syria. Egypt. Lebanon. Jordan. Those are the 4 countries that border them now. Call match the leader to his name. We're going to start with the upper left-hand corner. I want one person on this side who thinks they know who that is.
Basher.
Huh?
Basher.
Yeah, Assad? Yeah. Okay, let's see if it is. Oh, shoot, did the other one too. Now, who wants to take the second one? Yeah, Willie. All right. What's unique about Michael Ayan? Something unique, him compared to these other 3.
Jewish.
Christian.
Christian.
Remember that country says in their constitution, the president of Lebanon has to be a Christian. but it's a three-pronged government, and the other two are Muslim. Well, that one's the prime minister, and the other one's the president of their parliament. The third one, who is that?
King Abdullah. Oh,
King Abdullah, and actually it's Abdullah II. And that now leaves us with one guy. What's his name?
Sissy.
He killed you.
He's a sissy.
Sissy, remember Sissy pizza? You say Sissy. You don't say sissy. You believe it. He killed you. But that's right. He's not too bad for Israel. The other two before him, all the way back to the 60s, they were so bad. He doesn't let the Muslim Brotherhood get away with stuff like the other presidents. He's kind of okay. He's still a Muslim. Okay, now match the leader to his country. We'll take the first one in the left. What is his name?
Syria. Oh.
His name is not Syria. I'll give you one more chance. Assad. Okay, Joe. So what country is he?
Syria.
I think you got it. Michael Aoun. Somebody over here tell me which country he's in. Lebanon. King Abdullah II.
Jordan.
And who's the next one?
Egypt.
He turned the lights out on you. That was a warning. You know that.
Sissy.
Al-Sisi.
Sissy. He owns the pizza joint.
What are three factors that led to the 6-Day War? There's a lot of detail in this, so I'm just going to put these up. But we as Christians need to know some of these things and why they happened. That 6-Day War was miraculous. It started, why? Because Russia, Brezhnev, he sent word to Egypt and said that Israel was attacking the Syrians at its northern border. So Egypt sent tanks into the Sinai Peninsula heading towards Israel. So it started with that false report. You see what Russia does? He plays with countries. And they still do that today.
Yes, they do.
So that was one. The other is down below. Egypt blocked Israel's ships from entering or exiting through the Strait of Tiran, and that was bad. And then the third one, Hamas started firing rockets from Gaza into Israel. So those three factors, and Israel decided, you know what, we got to do something. We got to attack them, because if all four of those countries attack us, we have no chance. If you see how many planes Israel has, it was a little over 200, I think. And these others over here had 600, 800, all these added together. You're outnumbered, so they said, we will strike first, and that's what they did. But those was what caused it. This one, I want you to think about it. All right, Joe, I'll give you one more chance. How long was the 6-Day War? Sometimes people see that they think it's going to be a trick question and you're afraid to say 6. But that's what it was. God's land and God's chosen people.
Wallace, I have a problem on understanding how the Jews can still not accept that Jesus is who he is.
I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. You're raised a certain. Why are you a Baptist? Why are you a Baptist?
Because my mom and daddy were.
Oh, there's no logical reason. They would say, why do you believe that guy? They killed him, then they stole his body and hid it, and y'all believe that guy? No. That's where'd they hear that from? Their parents and their parents.
But God was with them and carried them through so many times and everything.
They know that.
Yeah.
They
And
know that.
They do.
I wanted to share, I don't know if any of you know Joel Rosenberg or not, but he's a very famous author, and you may may not know, but he moved to Israel. He used to live, he was an American citizen, he wrote all those books that were kind of prophetic. He wrote the novel about the destruction of the Twin Towers before it ever happened. And he's written several books like that, and people started calling him a prophet. But anyway, in regard to the 6-Day War, this is what he said. In 6 days, the Jewish people defended themselves, destroyed their enemies, tripled their land, recaptured control of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years, and on the 7th day, they rested.
You know, that's a point that we didn't have in the class, and we should have. The seventh day, they did it all in 6 days and rested on the seventh. That's very good. Yeah, that's very good, yeah.
And you know what? Also, the whole world said this was impossible.
Oh, yeah.
It was only an act of God.
Yeah.
Even people who were secular had to
Even-
look at that
Even
and
some of the
say,
Muslims had said that, the
Yes.
Arabs have said
Uh-huh.
that. There were conversions to
Yes.
Christianity out of this.
a big.
They don't get much recognition, you don't hear it much, but there were a lot. They said, he had to, God had to do it for him. There's no way that little tiny country could be all four of us, but they did. The City of Jerusalem. I just thought this was a nice song. I've done this before.
Last night I lay sleeping, there came a dream so fair. I stood in old Jerusalem beside the temple there. I heard the children singing, and at last they sang. Methought the voice of angels from heaven and terrain. Methought the voice of angels from heaven and terrain. And then methought my dream was changed, the streets no longer rang. Hushed were the glad hosannas, the little children sang. The sun grew dark with mystery, the morn was cold and chill, as the shadow of a cross rose back on a lonely hill. As the shadow and once again the scene was changed, new earth there seemed to be. I saw the holy city beside the tideless sea. The light of God was on its feet, the gates were open wide. And Lord might enter, and no one was denied.
book of Revelation, John said, I saw come down from heaven, a new heaven, a new earth, and a new Jerusalem coming down. And God will come down and dwell among his people. He will no longer be up there and we down here. And the new heaven comes down, so we will all be together. That's just great. The city of Jerusalem plays an important part in this. Let's have a closing prayer. Father, thank you for the day we've had today. We thank